In this video, we'll add the jump animation to our script, and we'll want to be able to move the character around our game level. But to do that, we're going to need a couple of things. We're going to need gravity, we're going to need to know when he's on the ground, and we're going to need, well, a ground. So let's begin with the ground. I'm going to come over here to the hierarchy and right-click and choose 3D Object and Plane. And I'm going to set the plane to the 0 position for X, Y, and Z. So now we know that he's on the ground. Now, what we need is the ability to push down on the ground, to push down so he has gravity. What we need to do is go back into the script and create that. So what let's do is let's go back into the script. And to create gravity, let's go down here into the update function below our if-else statements. And let's say we want to move that character controller. We want to we're going to need to create a variable. I'll call it move direction. And we'll multiply that by what's called time.delta_time, which if we wanted to, we could highlight time.delta_time. And we can press Control or Command apostrophe on the keyboard, and we can bring up the scripting documentation for Unity. Now here is time.delta_time. So what we're doing is we're using this function to make our game frame rate independent. In other words, we're basing the movement on time rather than on the frame rate. And that's good for things like gravity because the frame rate can fluctuate depending on what's going on in the game and how good the processor is on the computer or console or whatever. So we don't want to base things like gravity on something that could fluctuate. So that's why we use time.delta_time. So let's go back here and bring up our script again. I need to close off the parentheses, add a semicolon, and also let's take that variable that we're going to create called move direction, and let's say that it should push down in the Y. I'll type negative equals, which is the same as minus something equals, and I'll use gravity times time.delta_time. There we go. Semicolon at the end. Now, of course, you can see that we've got a few variables that we need to deal with here. I've created a gravity variable and I've created a move direction, and we need to put those up here so Unity knows what we're doing. So let's come up here and let's first create that move direction. I'm going to create a private variable, and I'm going to make it be of type Vector3, and of course we'll call it move direction like we did down there, and we'll set this to Vector3 0. And gravity, we need to deal with that too. We'll create a public float variable called gravity, and creating it as a public variable will allow us to modify it in the inspector on the fly. We'll go ahead and call this 20.0, and we'll put an F there because it's a float, and I'll save. So now you can see these aren't red anymore. That's good. All right, so let's go back to our game now. Make sure there's no errors happening here. If I hit play, not much happens. You can't see any difference really. But if I took this plane and moved it up and hit play, now he'd drop. So you can see that he's being pushed on by that gravity. And if I select the character over here, you can see that because we created the gravity as a public variable, we now have access to it over here in the inspector. All right, so let me bring that plane back down here. Let me select that and type 0 in the Y. Okay, so now we know he's being pushed down onto the ground, and when he's touching the ground, he's going to be grounded. And we need to know whether he's grounded or not when he jumps. Now, I don't want to have the player be able to have him jump, and while he's in the air, hit jump again and have him continue going up indefinitely. I just want him to be able to jump once, and while he's in the air, you can't jump again until he hits the ground again. So what we need to know, or what Unity needs to know, is when he's grounded. So let's go back over to the script and let's just create that bit of code. So I'm going to come in here to the update, and in front of input.getKey, I'm going to type controller, that's our character controller, is grounded, and. So what this says is if the character controller is grounded, is on the ground, and you're pushing the up key, then transition to the run animation clip. Otherwise, else, if the controller is grounded and you are not pushing on the up key, then switch back to the idle, which is 0. All right. So the next thing we should work on is the jump. And what we're going to need is a couple lines here that's similar to our if statement that basically says if the spacebar is pushed down, then change the animation parameter to 2. But in addition, we're also going to need to give it force upward, a jump force. So let's begin on that. I'm going to go ahead and just right here below this if statement, I'm going to begin by saying if we've got input coming in from a button that Unity calls jump, which is the spacebar, and if the controller is grounded once again, then what we need to do is set that animator controller variable, which is the integer that we called animation parameter. I'm just going to copy this and put this down here and change the 0 to 2. There we go. So now what we've got is if we push down the space bar and the controller is on the ground, then change the animation parameter in the animator controller to 2. Now we've got a variable up here called move direction, and you can see we're using that to create a bit of gravity. What we can do for just a moment when the space bar is pushed is we can say that that move direction in the y-axis is going to be equal to a variable that we'll call jump force. And it's red here because we haven't defined it. So we'll come back up to the variables area and we'll create a public float. Call it jump force and give it some sort of value. Let's give it 10 for now and see how that works. We'll be able to adjust this in the inspector on the fly. So now we've got our variable jump force defined in our script. Well, let's test it out. Let's see if it works. I'm going to save the script. I'm going to go back to Unity and let's just hit play. All right, so I hit the up arrow. He runs. I let up off of it. He goes back to idle. I hit the jump or the space bar and he goes up. But he doesn't change to his jump animation. Oh, there it is. He didn't get high enough. So here, let me turn the game off for just a minute. Let me move the camera back so we can kind of see what's going on. Oh, better yet, you know what let's do? Instead of moving the camera back, let's parent the camera to the character so it goes up when he goes up. So I'll just take the camera here in the hierarchy and just click and drag it right on the character and drop it there. Now it's a part of these child objects underneath that main character object. So if we hit play, and now if we hit the space bar, he'll go up. And we can see he's not quite, there he is, kind of. So let's take a look at this. What I'm going to do is go back to the animator. And here's our transitions for the jump. Just to make things easy, I'm going to take this transition from the idle to the jump and I'm going to turn off exit time. So there really is no time between the idle and the jump. And I'm going to do that back to the idle as well. I'll just turn off exit time here. And I'll save. And let's give that another try. I'll hit play. There he goes. So now he transitions to that jump animation a little quicker. All right. So now we've got our idle, our jump, and our run animations set up so we can trigger them through keyboard events. So in the next video, what we'll do is we'll set up a speed variable and a turn variable, and we'll get him moving around the scene as well. So stay tuned for that. I'll see you then.